So we're going to deal with a specific topic, but just really unfolding it is going to take a little bit of time and effort. So it's very clear that now David Lynch has distanced himself from Dune the film that he made in the 1980s. And he's very clear he doesn't like the film. He thought he sold out with the film. He only did it for money. He never really was into science fiction. And so far as that goes, I think those are accurate statements. However, there is a bit of a gap between what he says now and has been saying for the last decade or so and what he said when the film was being made and Herbert's attitude towards the whole project. Now, Denis has also made very clear as a passionate lover of Dune, somebody who grew up with Dune, who really loved Dune as a book, he doesn't really like the David Lynch version. He respects parts of it, but for the most part, to him, it's not really giving us the novel. And I understand that. So from a book reader perspective, from a fan perspective, I have no issue with him. I have no problem with his interpretation. If he doesn't like the film, that's perfectly legitimate. But what's getting lost here is Herbert himself. I've read a number of articles now, and they reference what Lynch thinks today and what Denis thinks today, but Herbert is really not cited at all. He's just completely forgotten. Now, whether out of laziness or frankly, perhaps to be kind to David, and I understand that. I admire David as well. I want to get into filmmaking, and I consider him a major influence. And I have come late to the Lynch party. I really only became a Lynch fan after Mulholland Drive. But I'm not going to go into my whole biography with Lynch. But the point is, I also have a huge admiration and love for David Lynch, but I have to be the bad skunk in the room and say, I think he's misrepresenting what happened. Because we go back to the interviews, statements, and again, Herbert visited the set. So it wasn't just maybe he just saw a rough cut and that's it. No, he was on the set. He visited the set of Dune. So he saw it up close. And we have the actors' testimony as well, that almost universally, they tell us Lynch liked doing Dune. He loved it despite a lot of production issues. He loved making it. He was very relaxed. He seemed very happy. Again, he did have issues with the producers as well as a little bit with Herbert because they wanted to make a very faithful adaptation. And he was frustrated he had to do so many drafts of the screenplay. But overall, again, up until its release, he was very happy with Dune. Again, yes, he did it mostly as a business decision, but he wanted to do it. But then Dune is released. It's a huge disappointment. Now, even that's a bit of a mythology. People think it flopped everywhere. No, it did actually succeed in various places. For instance, in France, actually, Dune was very successful and very popular. And ironically, France is also a country that loves David Lynch. David Lynch is like a big hero over there. Yes, in most places, Dune disappointed. It didn't do what the producers wanted. So Lynch, not surprisingly, since Dune really almost destroyed his career, had a very negative reaction toward. But Frank Herbert himself has been very clear and was very explicit. He liked the film. He liked most of the film. The only issue he had was with the ending. He did think the ending did not match up to the novel. It's also true it's not a literal translation. Lynch changed a lot of minor details. He changed a lot of major details. But overall, the producers were clear they wanted Lynch to do mainly the book and keep as much of the book in the screenplay as possible. 2 hours and 17 minutes is really short for a novel of Dune's size, caliber, and its ideas and themes. It's a very ambitious film, and perhaps it's not a good film unto itself. We're not going to get into the quality of Dune, which would take its own long, lengthy essay. But in terms of the attitudes of the various players, both Herbert and Lynch, at the time, did like the film and approved of the film.
Medium, and you're happy with the film. Well, I get asked a specific question a lot of times. If the settings, the scenes that I saw in David's film match my original imagination, the things that I projected in my imagination, and I must tell you that some of them do, precisely. Some of them don't, and some of them are better. Which is what you would expect of artists such as David and Tony Masters. And I'm delighted with that. I mean, why not take it and improve on it visually? As far as I'm concerned, the film is a visual feast. I would love to have some of the scenes as stills to frame and have around me. They're beautiful.
Because of its disappointing reception, David Lynch has frankly been mythologizing what happened with Dune and his reaction to Dune. And that's fine that Lynch has a very negative reaction towards it and doesn't care about Dune anymore. That's perfectly fine. But again, as a researcher, I have to point out he is misrepresenting what happened. At the time, he was happy with it and Herbert was happy with it, and they were explicitly endorsing the film. But Frank is dead, Lynch is still alive, and Denis is still alive, so they get to still shape the narrative. And I understand that. Denis, for the purposes of marketing, is going to make this his film and call it finally the faithful adaptation that we've been waiting for. But again, we go back through the statements carefully. We already have a faithful adaptation. According to the creator himself, Dune, the film that David Lynch made, was faithful to the majority of the book and the majority of the essence and the core theme and message of the book. So as a fan and as a book reader, you can still say, I don't like Lynch, I don't like his version, I don't like what they did to Dune. That's perfectly legitimate. But in terms of answering that question, what did Herbert think? He mostly approved of the film. He mostly liked it. So while it may be hard to fathom that, because its quality has been really ruthlessly criticized, I think it's mostly a mythology of Lynch, and that's fine if you want to believe Lynch, that there's nothing good about Dune, it was a disaster for everybody, nobody likes this thing, not even the book readers want this thing. That's really not true. There are a minority of fans of Lynch as well as the book who really, really like Dune the film. And in terms of fidelity, the creator has clarified. He thought it was mostly faithful to his work. We can dispute that, of course. And I'm not saying Frank Herbert is the word of God, but we do have an answer to the question. Is the Lynch version a faithful adaptation of Dune the novel? He says yes, and he enjoyed most of the film. His only major issue was with the ending. We can still dispute him, but we haven't answered the question. It's understandable that Lynch is mythologized given its failure at the box office and it being critically panned, but he is misrepresenting what happened back then, and it's fine he has a different attitude, but at the time, he did endorse the film, and Frank Herbert endorsed the film. And if Denis still doesn't like the film, that's also fine, but I think he's falsifying that it's not a faithful adaptation. According to Herbert, it was. If he wants to do something even more literal, that's also fine, but we haven't answered the question. Was Frank Herbert happy with Dune the film by David Lynch? And the answer is yes. His only major complaints were with the ending and a few key scenes, and we'll get more into that, but he was mainly happy with Dune. If other people are displeased, that's also fine, but he has made clear he liked Dune, except for the ending, he mostly approved of it. Thank you for listening.